In this video is every single major fantasy football update from week 2 that just concluded of NFL training camp. We'll start with players rising in fantasy football value, then get into the major updates, and there are a lot of them that could have some pretty big implications, and finish with one player that is getting extremely overhyped and his ADP is climbing like crazy. Make sure to stick around for that and subscribe to this channel to get this video of training camp news in fantasy football relation every single week. But probably the biggest riser right now, it's going to be Zach Charbonnet. And this is not good for Kenneth Walker fans and fantasy owners, and really anybody that's interested in taking any of these guys. To set the scene, Kenneth Walker was at every single practice, doing great, amazing. Even Mike McDonald said that he is doing quote unquote everything in camp, and he's looking absolutely amazing for the season. Then he misses a practice. Okay, no problem. McDonald said it's nothing. It's just for rest. That happens a lot with the top guys. We saw it with Brock Bowers a couple days ago. Then he misses a second straight practice. The reasoning was undisclosed and no given information was there. Brushes it off. Okay, fine. 2 days, a little bit suspicious, but nothing crazy. Then McDonald comes out and says Walker is dealing with a sore foot and soreness in his foot. So you see where this is stringing along here. McDonald has a pretty low coach speak index for injury transparency, which isn't necessarily the best, but Walker sits out his third straight practice on Monday. And now we have to put it all together. I mean, he's healthy for the first 8 practices. Then all of a sudden he misses 3 straight. That's a little bit suspicious. And this might not seem like anything serious now. It is pretty early in the preseason still. But what it has done is allow Zach Charbonnet to get that much more work with the first team in training camp so far. And if we just go back to a short memory of last season, we know exactly what he can do as the RB1. He averaged over 20 fantasy points a game when he was the starter when Kenneth Walker was out, with one of the highest target shares, highest red zone usage rates, and highest just running back usage rates in general as far as running back shares. He was the only guy using that offense, and this isn't to say Kenneth Walker is going to be phased out, because these two are extremely talented and great running backs, and reports are saying it's probably going to be a little bit closer to a split backfield in 2025 compared to what we saw from last season, even before Kenneth Walker's suspicious injury that he's now missing 3 straight practices for. But Charbonnet, he's going as the RB38 in round 11 of fantasy football drafts. He is a premium handcuff, one of the top 5 in my opinion. I'm targeting him in 100% of my leagues. You look at Kenneth Walker, he's going as the RB21 in round 3 to 4. That's not bad, but I'll continue to keep you guys updated on Walker's status, because 3 straight practices missed is not great. Giving Zach Charbonnet more opportunity with the first team, we know he's great. So make sure to stay subscribed to this channel, because I will always update you every single week on all of the major training camp news. But another guy shining in that is Travis Hunter, and we have some pretty big information on him and what the Jags plan to do with him on offense and defense. We know this guy is a generational talent, being able to do both of those things. Through the first 7 practices that Travis Hunter has logged, 72 offensive snaps and 67 defensive snaps, pretty much solidifying that he's going to be used on both sides of the ball a lot and often. Does it mean he's a trap in fantasy football? No. He's listed as the wide receiver 2 in their depth chart, the cornerback 3 in the defensive depth chart. So you might look at that and say there's a little bit of discrepancy. Probably going to start primarily on wide receiver. We saw a little bit of that in his snap percentages and differences in camp, but we do have to understand, we have to take preseason depth charts with a grain of salt. A word of wisdom for you guys: training camp preseason depth charts are really never solidified, and teams don't put too much effort into it to overcorrect them. So don't look into it too much. If you see a guy that's supposed to be wide receiver 1 and he's put it like the 2 or 3, it's really not that big of a deal unless there is a major injury. But he's going in as the wide receiver 33 this year, regardless of how many plays he makes in camp, which has already been a ton. He's probably not going to jump that much in ADP because of the fact that he is splitting offense and defense. Unfortunately, though, on the other side of that, his name value is insanely high, so your league mates are probably going to have to reach and want to reach on him. So you're not going to get him to fall where his ADP should be, which is where I'm avoiding him if everybody else is overdrafting him at his current price. But it's very difficult for him to overperform because he is capped by the ability of how many offensive snaps he does play. But it's also very difficult for him to not perform to his ADP, because the offense should be good and he's a generational wide receiver talent, I guess you could call it, but that limitation is there with the snap differential. Liam Cohen and everybody on the staff loves him. He is an offensive-minded head coach. I think Travis Hunter is going to sway more towards the offensive side. I'm not avoiding him. If he falls where his ADP is actually going to be, that's perfectly fine. But again, most people in home leagues are going to be overdrafting Travis Hunter because of the name value, so don't go ahead and reach on him just to make sure you get him when he's not going to be playing a full offensive snaps. But there is absolutely no worry of him actually playing good, because he is amazing in camp right now. But another guy crushing in week 2 of camp is Jordan Mason, and this is a name you're probably not used to hearing. He is getting heavily used so far, and the Vikings coaching staff has publicly said They're impressed with his receiving skills, specifically that, and that is amazing. If we know anything about fantasy football, pass catching for running backs is an elite trait to breaking their ADP. All the reports we've seen on camp utilization is showing that this backfield is going to be split mostly towards a 60-40, probably not a 50-50, especially to start the beginning of the year. But Aaron Jones was the least efficient running back in the red zone last year as a starter. He averaged negative yards almost in the red zone inside the 5 last year. That's exactly why they went out and traded for Jordan Mason, a 5th-round pick, and they signed him with a $10 million contract, which is tied for the 13th most guaranteed money at the running back position, and he's technically a backup. That should tell you a lot from the business perspective of what they want to do with him. And we can expect Mason to have the majority of the red zone role in this offense and the opportunities there, and the possibility of owning the passing down role. Third down could possibly be his as well. So any of those two things are the most important for fantasy football. Like in scoring fantasy football points, touchdowns and receiving upside is what you want. That pretty much makes Jordan Mason a top 3 handcuff for the fantasy football year. And I don't really think it's fair to call him a handcuff. From what we've been seeing with the reports, he's probably going to be borderline startable at some point in the season. He's going as the RB38 in fantasy football draft, so that might be a little bit of a reach. That's around 10, but it's a free price for a guy that's getting a ton of usage, a ton of capital with trading for him and signing him to a big contract. We saw Aaron Jones was inefficient last year. They solve a problem with Jordan Mason. I love him, and a guy that is rising up fantasy football boards and training camp right now. But another player that is going only up you need to know about is TreVeyon Henderson. And I've talked about him before on this channel. Again, make sure to subscribe if you are new because nobody else is doing it like this. The 2nd-round pick here has been working exclusively with the first team all week in training camp. Over the weekend's practice, he was the entire offense, especially in the red zone. That specifically, he had 5 receptions, 3 receiving touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown in that area of the field. Yes, it's training camp, it's early, but there is definitely something to be said about his receiving usage because he is an elite receiving running back, clearly the best on the team over Ramondre and Antonio Gibson. Yes, they're both decent, but they also both totaled for almost 10 fumbles last year. That's not good. They probably won't have a ton of time on field. I do think people are underestimating Ramondre Stevenson this year a bit too much. I'll get into that on another video. One look at his college tape and especially what we're seeing in camp, it'll tell you he's going to be the main receiving back. That starts on a roster that is led by Josh McDaniels. Again, they bring him in. The last time he was in this offense, he led James White to a target share of 18.1%, 17.4%, and 22.2% in his last 3 healthy seasons. That target share at the running back position would have put him top 2 last season. All of those numbers would be top 2 in target share. So if TreVeyon Henderson can get anywhere near that, sniff even a 15% team target share, which isn't crazy to say, he is going to be an insane value at the RB25 in an ascending offense. Yes, they're not going to be Super Bowl bound, borderline playoff bound, but where he's being drafted at is a complete steal. I'm taking him in all my drafts. But a good segue here into camp news and injuries. There's a ton of injuries from this week, so you're going to want to make sure to stick around for this. Cam Skattebo, he has some pretty big implications for his team in fantasy football. On Saturday, he injured his hamstring and is now considered day-to-day. He underwent an MRI. We know hamstring injuries can linger, and they're pretty hard to shake sometimes, but the MRI came back optimistic, not necessarily negative, but that's not helping his case whatsoever because we look at the rest of the information from the training camp. There is a lot of running backs in this backfield getting run, and even before the injury to him, Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary both have been taking all of the first-team reps over Cam Skattebo in training camp. Now, Scat is making a push and was making a push before his injury that was publicly known to break in and get some first-team reps, but he's officially listed as the RB3 on the depth chart. Again, we cannot take depth charts into account in preseason, but it is definitely something to monitor because hamstring injuries for running backs are not great. And again, he's going as the RB32. I expect his ADP to drop a decent amount with this new news, and everybody's going to overplay the RB3 on the depth chart. I've already seen it everywhere, but I will continue to update you on his injury and everyone else like it. So again, make sure to be subscribed for this training camp news in relation to fantasy football. But some massive injury news, again, it does not end, is Isaiah Likely, probably the biggest so far over last week. He was carted off the field on Tuesday with an ankle injury and limped back to the facility afterwards. Not a good sign at all. He's expected now to miss 6 weeks and undergo surgery that, again, none of it is pointing green. And that would put his timeline right at week 1, which I don't think he's going to play for. If he does, we can expect a heavy decrease in his snap percentage and probably be very limited in that game against the Bills, which causes Mark Andrews' stock to go up a good amount. Luckily, his ADP hasn't caught up, and Mark Andrews is still relatively low, just outside the top 7 tight ends. So I love his value there. On most sites, he's going as the tight end 9 in round 8. If you can get him there, beautiful. If you can't get one of the top 3 tight ends in Brock Bowers, George Kittle, or Trey McBride, I'd wait to get a guy like Mark Andrews in those later rounds, a couple other guys I'm targeting. If you want more information on that, let me know in the comments. But both of these tight ends will be used extremely heavily in the year when, again, Isaiah likely is healthy and back in this offense, especially in the red zone. They were both top 5 in red zone target rate, and I was fading Mark Andrews. I still follow that when he's healthy, but again, this is just something to know. And we look in another major injury here is going to be Khalil Shakir. He is week to week, not day to day, with a high ankle sprain from Friday's practice. This is another type of injury that's really tough to shake. These high ankle sprains don't go away easily, and the Bills need him. They don't have a great wide receiver room already. He is their exclusive slot guy, a low ADOT kind of guy, but very high impact and has some of the most sure hands in the league. He was the wide receiver 5 in yards after the catch last season. He's going as the wide receiver 41. I love that price for him. If he does happen to miss time coming into the NFL season, again, it's too early to know. I will update you in next week's training camp video. I update and make a new one every single week, but that would put Josh Palmer, who's been getting a lot of training camp buzz, and Keon Coleman as the 2 beneficiaries of that, possibly even Dalton Kincaid as well. But that kind of bleeds into the running back situation here with James Cook. He is still holding in from practice, wants his contract restructured. Hasn't really happened yet, but something that has happened, probably some pretty big news here. Najee Harris has officially still not been practicing. He suffered an eye injury on the July 4th incident. If you know, you know. If you don't, someone will inform you in the comments, or I will. Make sure to let me know. But he was spotted wearing a helmet and a weighted vest at camp over the weekend, which, to be fair, is a step up from where he was in week 1 in street clothes, not even on the field. But he is still on the NFI list, that is the non-football injury list, and is not close to returning from all reports. The reason this matters is because it's giving Omarion Hampton that much more work and reps with the first team, which he has been doing exactly that. We go look at the Hall of Fame game on Thursday. Yes, it's the first preseason technically game of the year. He was there for 1 drive, which is expected. Like, we don't expect someone, especially a rookie, to play the entirety of preseason games. I've seen some people overreact about his outside run where he didn't just put his shoulder down and go through the defense to break a tackle. Instead, he made a bit of a stutter move and then bounced to the outside on an outside run scheme anyway. It just didn't really work. He didn't get the first down and he got stuffed by a practice squad member. It's nothing you can really look into. That worked in college. It won't work in the NFL. We'll see. It's not really anything to be too worried about. But as for Najee's timeline, there is still not one for him to return, and it's undisclosed. But in the fantasy lens, he's being drafted as the RB39. I don't expect him to come in and take all of the work from Omarion Hampton. He's clearly going to be the #1 running back, and his ADP is showing that. But he might be a little bit undervalued for what he is. Again, we'll see what happens with his eye injury. Maybe he'll play with an eye patch. But another big update here, moving into a little bit of the legal stuff, is going to be Rashee Rice. His legal chapter has officially closed, and this is some pretty big news. He's practicing at training camp full speed ahead, which is expected. But that doesn't mean his legal stuff is completely cleared. When asked about the situation, Rice said it's still in the works, which is understandable and expected. The NFL hasn't finalized any plan going forward, so it's very possible he does miss time this season, which would make Xavier Worthy the #1 again. This is a guy that didn't really prove himself as the ex-wide receiver last year when he had that opportunity with Rashee Rice's injury. But this wide receiver room is more or less ambiguous. There won't be a breakout guy. Even if somebody does miss his time, the ADP will skyrocket. But in my opinion, the suspension, who knows how many games, is 100% going to happen, because we look at Jordan Addison. He got suspended for 3 games because of his legal issues. If the NFL can give him 3 games, we can expect a lot more for Rashee Rice compared to the severity of their issues, even though it was somewhat similar. Addison's ADP right now is valued at the wide receiver 34. I expect that to go down to the wide receiver 40 plus now with that news injury, especially when September gets closer. And I think I like that price, especially if you're in 12-team size leagues or less. You can more or less afford to draft him that low and have him miss a couple games. If you can survive those first 3 weeks, which 100% you will, he's not going to necessarily be in your starting lineup, even if he was healthy. If you can build your team for playoffs and get a guy that's probably going to be pretty valuable there later because of it, I'm 100% doing that. But I will continue to keep you guys updated on both of these guys, especially Rashee Rice and his legal issues. But another huge injury here, possibly more relevant for fantasy football and the rest of his team, is Matthew Stafford. He did not return to practice this week and will not practice in joint practices next week. He's visiting a back specialist again for his back injury. This is the 2nd time in 2 weeks. It's not a good sign. He's now set to work on the side alone at practice, away from the jog throughs this week, doing static throwing. unloaded running and treadmill running, walking, core exercises. Like, these are pretty low intensity exercises that he's doing here. This is said by Sean McVay, by the way, who is very trustworthy on injury updates if you look at Coach Speak. All this for Stafford to hope to be ready in week 1 for their opener on September 7th. This looks like a more serious injury, though. He's 37 years old. There's a chance we see Jimmy G at some point this year. Way too early in the offseason to tell, but it would definitely hurt everybody. Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, even Kyron Williams maybe a little bit, because the offense would score less touchdowns if he were to miss some time. Again, all of these news injuries, I'll continue to update you guys, so please make sure to be subscribed so you do not miss anything and cover all your bases. But some quick updates for some quarterback rooms that are not looking great. The Colts' first unofficial depth chart has been released of who their quarterback 1 is going to be. This decision is extremely important for fantasy football because it decides the fate of a lot of borderline relevant guys. And that, to break down for you, their depth chart says QB1, Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, QB2, Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. So they don't even know themselves. It is still 100% up for grabs. Richardson starting will benefit only himself and nobody else because of the rushing upside and his inefficiency everywhere else. We've seen it before. Daniel Jones might not be a great NFL quarterback, but it's going to be better for Jonathan Taylor because there's less rushing attempts and steal and goal line touchdowns. It's going to be better for Pittman and Warren just because he passes a little bit more efficiently, but this is still projected to be a bottom offense. You don't want to be starting Daniel Jones at quarterback. Anthony Richardson, if he was, you could possibly do that, but just leave him on the waivers. When that time comes, it comes. And then an update on Caleb Williams. It looked really, really bad in the first 2 weeks of training camp, and he's still getting upset when he's not completing passes the way he should, and it's definitely a little bit worrisome. And he has an improved offensive line, an improved team, one of the best supporting casts. Like, this should not be happening, and you get the best coaching upgrade of the offseason in Ben Johnson. The good news, though, is that DJ Moore is being used a ton. They gave him reps at running back and some jet sweep action. It looks good for him in camp, but if Caleb Williams can't put it together, we may have more to worry about. But now it's time for the most overhyped player through the first 2 weeks of the NFL training camp for fantasy football. You should not be buying the hype on. For the second straight week, Kyle Pitts is back in this spot, and we have even more positive news that does not really exist that's circulating. Number 1, Kyle Pitts and Michael Penix are golf buddies. That's the news we're going off, and that's what's making his ADP jump. Penix is working on establishing a high-level chemistry with Kyle Pitts in hopes that he can fulfill his potential. We've been drafting Pitts on his potential for years now. This means nothing. It's training camp buzz. It's words. It's overreacting. Last week, it was Pitts working with the wide receivers. Clips were circulating. If we just take 2 seconds to look at what coaches and Zach Robinson are actually saying, he said himself, details, fundamentals, and consistency is Kyle Pitts' problem. That is not what you want to hear when you're drafting a tight end, especially as a coaching staff as well. Like, those should be pretty polished if you've made it this far. And to make it worse, Kyle Pitts saw all of his lowest snap percentages in the games that Michael Penix played last season when he was starting. And his horrible run blocking is not helping him stay on the field. Like, that's the one thing that gets tight ends on the field. If you can't do that, you're not going to be able to run as many routes and get those opportunities. Again, if you want to continue to get these real updates without any of the fluff in fantasy football, continue to follow this page if you guys are new. Thank you guys so much for watching. But that is going to finish this video. I appreciate you guys hopping in. I'll see you in the training camp news video in week 3. All glory to the man above. I'll catch you in that one.